whole time I've been muted, so now we will start all over. I've just been sitting here talking, thinking everything is fine. Didn't even realize I was muted. Okay, so my name is Miss Jai. I am so excited to be here today for another episode of Ask Miss Jai Live. Today, we're going to be talking about visual representation of trans and non binary people and what that actually means. And is that enough for us to be allies, accomplices, and create gender inclusive environments? The short answer is no, but we'll talk a little bit more in detail around what that looks like. So my name is Miss Jai. I am the host of Ask Miss Jai Live. Miss Jai Live got started as a way for us to, as healthcare providers, as public health service staff, to learn how to better serve trans and non-binary people in our organizations and in the services that we provide. So I'm really excited for you to be here. If you're catching this live, go ahead and put a hashtag live in the chat. If you are catching it on the replay, go ahead and put a hashtag replay and let me know in the comments what you found most helpful, most interesting about our conversation today. But I can see all your comments, so go ahead and let me know if you're catching this live as well. So what is visual representation? If you have seen, when I talk about visual representation of trans and non-binary people, I mean having programs, having services, having promotional materials that include trans and non-binary people like trans and non-binary people's faces, that includes including concerns that trans and non-binary people face, especially around their health and well-being, that includes having trans and non-binary people present in the services. So having staff, having marketing materials that include our faces. These are all ways that we can have visual representation of community or of trans and non-binary people in the programs that we run. The other way is through markers, visual markers that let us know that a space is inclusive and welcoming. So it could be things like the progressive pride flag. It could be things like the trans pride flag. It could be folks wearing pronoun pins. These are all visual ways that visual representation and visibility can be helpful to us. And this is what we're talking about with visible representation and visibility. So why are we talking about it today? Why are we talking about it right now? Hi, Rose. Hi, Shakina. Thank you so much for catching this. Let me know what questions you have in the chat as these things come up too. So why are we talking about it today? Well, we are heading towards the end of May, and we are about to be in Pride Month in June. And one of the things that we talk about a lot within our community for Pride Month is what it means for organizations or companies to take on representation or take on campaigns that show that they are progressive and welcoming and affirming, and visibly putting us front and center as part of Pride Month marketing materials, because we have a disposable income and folks want our disposable income. And so we see a lot more visual representation during Pride Month from these larger corporations, these larger companies. Visibility is also an important thing for us to talk about because we're also on the heels of a pretty big backlash in the trans and non-binary community to a visibility campaign with Dylan Mulvaney as a spokesperson for Bud Light. And so I think as we're moving into Pride Month, it's important for us to think about what visibility means and how we can take it the step further to actually be inclusive and supportive of trans and non-binary people in the services that we are providing. The other part of this is that visibility is a double-edged sword. So I mentioned a little bit the backlash. I also will talk a little bit about my own personal experience. So I'm very visibly trans. I share and I have information like Ask Miss Jai Live. I talk about being a gender diverse individual across all of social media. I talk about it with my friends and my family. I talk about it constantly because I think visibility is a really important way to educate people and change hearts and minds. But the double-edged side of that as well is that I also get a lot of hate mail. And so I get folks saying things to me that's really hurtful and incendiary. I have had folks call me groomer. I've had folks say that they hope that I become a statistic, trying to reference the fact that over 40% of trans and non-binary people have contemplated or attempted suicide in their lifetimes. So I get this kind of feedback by putting out videos like this. And I think that it's an important reminder for us that visibility only takes this so far for us as organizations, but we need to also be willing to build in procedure and build in policies that also create safety for our trans and non-binary people when they're in our services, and also be prepared for that backlash and how we will respond to that backlash when it occurs, because it's happening more frequently now. So that's why we're talking about this today. How does visibility help? How does representation of trans people help the health and well-being of trans people? Well, first, if we know that if we see services marketed to us that include trans and non-binary representation, we're more likely to engage with that service. We're more likely to approach and try and get services for ourselves, and also refer other trans and non-binary people to those services. I'd love to hear in the chat if there are any organizations you've seen that have representation that you've really appreciated, or that you've seen and you've been like, that looks like a place for me. So share in the comments, like, what are some organizations that you feel like are really affirming in the marketing and the media and the materials that you see out and about that organization? Because I think it's a great way for us to see how it's being modeled by folks as well. So it helps us to figure out which services are safe for us. It shows us that there's at least the beginning or a surface level investment in our community, in who we are. I think with some organizations, especially health and healthcare and public health organizations, we might see it more frequently that that representation is taking place and that representation is present for folks, versus like a corporation that's only bringing out something for Pride Month. So if we see it consistently, then it can build trust and rapport with our community. And then the other thing that it's helpful for is it can bring awareness to us as trans and non-binary people about other health conditions that we might not have considered, that we or didn't believe were applicable to us. So if I see a pamphlet about being trans and heart conditions or high cholesterol, then I might think to myself, oh, that might be something that I need to actually look into for myself. So it also helps us to better understand that our overall health and well-being is so much broader than just gender affirming care, or hormone replacement therapy, or gender affirming surgical procedures. So it helps to broaden that understanding of what health things we need to be aware of for ourselves. Especially if it's things like, these are things that can happen if you are also on hormone therapy, you need to consider these other health pieces that might be taking place. That helps us a lot. So that's how trans representation, visibility can be helpful. It can also allow us the opportunity to feel safer when we are accessing services. So if we know that an organization has materials out there in the world that are trans inclusive, then we might walk into an organization being like, oh, this is a safe space for us as well, at least until that is proven otherwise. So we already kind of walk into it knowing like, okay, this is probably a space that's going to be a little bit more on the ball and might understand a little bit more about trans identity. But why is it not enough? So I already mentioned a couple of ways that it's not enough. The first is that is through what I mentioned before, which is that Pride Month is coming up. So we have this phenomenon called pinkwashing, where you have these companies, these organizations come in and they tote about how inclusive and diverse they are and about how much they support the community. But then when push comes to shove and we're seeing legislation pass, we're seeing boycotts happen, we're seeing a loud negative response to that from a transphobic space, that those companies cave, or those folks are no longer interested in being supporters of the community. Or as soon as June is up, the month is up, then those organizations are also like, okay, well, we did our Pride thing for the month. That's the only time we need to talk about LGBTQ people. We'll talk about them again next year. And so that's why visibility is not enough to make an inclusive organization, because if you're only rolling that out for folks at a given point in time, but outside of that are rolling it back up into the closet and not providing services that actually meet our needs, then it's not going deep enough for us to get our health care needs met or our public health needs met. And I see here Shakina shared, I'm highly visible in Pennsylvania. Target is a visible marketing Target is a visible marketing in an affirming way. Macy's somewhat. Macy's is one of our Pittsburgh Pride March. Yeah. So we have these companies that come on and do this work. And I think that this is also a great way for us to put additional pressure on these organizations and these companies as well, not just healthcare and public health, but companies across our society that are supporting trans and non-binary people or supporting the LGBTQ community, and saying like, what are you doing to support us legislatively? What are you doing to support us as we are actively under attack as well? So the pink washing is an aspect of why it's not enough. The other part of it is that if I think about it from an organizational standpoint, so if we are a healthcare organization, if I am working for a healthcare organization and the healthcare organization has put out materials saying like, all are welcome. This place is for everyone. This place is for trans and non-binary people. They have signs up or billboards in our city that show trans and non-binary people present in services, or they're actively recruiting and trying to get folks engaged in gender affirming care, then that's the first step. But if that person comes through the doors and I, as a staff member, am not trained on how to greet that person, I don't understand what pronouns are, I don't understand how to refer to someone by their current name versus their legal name, or if I'm a janitorial staff or a security guard and I don't know the policies around restroom usage, then I might try and bar someone from using a restroom or a dressing room that doesn't match what I assume to be by their sex assigned at birth. And so not having those additional layers, not having those additional trainings, that additional support means that the visibility and putting trans people out front and center isn't actually doing anything to change the material conditions of our lives. It's not doing anything to actually change our ability to access the care or get the services met. And in fact, it feels almost a little bit like a bait and switch, where we're like, well, we were told that this is a really safe place to come to. We were told this is a really affirming place to come to. And when I came, it was actually incredibly unaffirming. It was actually incredibly harmful. And so that will actually do more to damage our reputation and trust with the community than if we had done nothing at all. And I see Shakina added here too. Both are openly embracing us throughout the year and have policies in place to provide that support to us and employees. Yeah, so that's the big difference, right? What do we have additionally beyond just throwing rainbow flags on things? What do we have additionally beyond just trying to sell something to our community? How are we investing in our communities in a way that's non-transactional? So not just with the expectation that trans people will bring us money. The other piece of this is around what is available to our trans and non-binary folks in these services as well. So it's one thing to say trans and non-binary people are welcome here, but if those services then don't include care that is nuanced to trans and non-binary experience or health needs, then that care isn't super helpful. And so what I mean by this is that if you have, let's say you're a primary care physician's office and you say trans and non-binary people are present here, but we refuse to do any gender affirming hormone therapy, then that's not a really affirming place for someone to get their health needs met. Even if they have other health concerns like diabetes or high cholesterol, those are things that can be, that folks may not prioritize around their health. Their priority might be their gender affirming hormone therapy. And if they're not able to get that accomplished, then they're not going to come back to get those other pieces accomplished as well, because now they already have to go to another provider in order to get their hormone therapy. So we have to think about, what are we providing? How do we provide that? Is our environment safe for trans and non-binary people? And then put out the visible representation of, and this is what's available, and actively market to spaces where trans and non-binary people live, work, and play, so that they know that we are a welcoming, open provider. And so I keep talking about health providers, and we've mentioned a couple of times like corporations as well, but I'm just curious from folks, and you can put in the comments as well, but what are some, have you been to an affirming health provider before, or an affirming public health organization before? Feel free to name them in the comments. Let me know what your thoughts are, and what about that experience made it feel affirming for you, because I'd love to hear that as well. So how do we do better? I've mentioned a couple of pieces already, but some of the big things around doing better beyond the visible representation is making sure that we have policies in place so that folks know what the expectations are around asking pronouns, asking name. I think this is especially important right now because there's a lot of misinformation out there. I mentioned this in last week's episode around what are anti-trans bills, is that there's a lot of misinformation right now. And folks really aren't sure what they can or can't talk about, or how they can or can't talk about some trans identity. And so make it really clear in your policies what it is that is expected. Have a procedure in place so that if that's not being followed, then staff can be supported in making those changes and actually following the policy as it's stated as well. And make sure that your systems are set up to collect information appropriately. So are we reflecting someone's pronouns on their documentation? Are we reflecting someone's current name on their documentation and not just their legal name? Or not their legal name if their legal name isn't necessary. So those are ways that we can support folks beyond just visible representation out in our community. The other thing is that we can actually go to our community and find out what are your health needs and let folks know in getting that information how that's actually going to be applied to the work. So we don't want to just put out another needs assessment. We don't want to just do another feedback group. We have to go to to our communities and say, we are asking this information so we can make X, Y, and Z changes so that these services are safer for you. And then once those changes have been made, we have a responsibility to go back to those same communities and say, we have made these changes. Let us know when things have changed so that we know that you all are trying. Because otherwise it sounds like you've taken more of our information or our stories. We're often leaned on to share about our trauma, to share about the harms that have happened to us, to share about how we haven't been able to access or get things. And so having to share that constantly can feel really overwhelming. And if we don't see actually anything change around it, then it feels to us like it's almost a little voyeuristic. Like we're just being asked for this information without it actually making any change. So show us how that has made change. Come back to us and tell us, these are the changes that we have made. This is what we are striving to do. And we want you to try our services and give us more feedback and let us know, has this actually changed? Has this actually shifted? Or is this still the same? Are we still having the same challenges? Are we still having the same problems? Because that's how we make our systems better. And then we also have to get champions on every level to care about diversity and equity, health equity initiatives. We also need to get folks on every level of our organization invested in equity initiatives for trans and non-binary people. And it doesn't need to be everyone on every level. That would be great. But if we can get a champion at the organizational leadership level, if we can get a champion at the middle management level, if we can get a champion at the direct service level, then we can start doing health equity work within our organizations that allows us to actually make shifts and changes across multiple spaces in the organization and not just at the direct service level or not just at the policy level, but then it isn't actually implemented in the clinic, et cetera. For our other organizations, for our corporations, for folks that are going to be doing Pride work, that are going to be launching Pride campaigns in June, I really encourage you to look at, like, is this the only time that you talk about supporting LGBT people? What is your plan to support LGBT people when there is the inevitable backlash to your messaging, which is going to happen, because we're seeing it happen right now outside of Pride Month. So what is your messaging and how will you address that? I highly encourage folks to not take the stand of the LA Dodgers, which was to just disinvite the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence from Pride Night, to disinvite folks or community groups that are complained about from services. I highly encourage you not to do those things, because that actually, again, undermines any of the trust or rapport that has been built with our community. That's a great way to have to do a lot more to build that response back up, or that respect back up. And I see here, Shakina, it's so good to hear from you. I'm so glad you're here and you're sharing your thoughts. So I see University of Pittsburgh Dental School has added into their intake process a gender identity section, which had an affirming/welcoming statement for a person to provide gender identity and pronouns. That is wonderful to hear, especially for a dental school, because, and like in any like dentistry environment, because I've worked with dentists in the past, And I've heard that the field of dentistry can be incredibly conservative. And so it's great to hear that a school is taking the initiative to include these pieces, because I feel like we're going to have more folks than in the field who are willing to talk about identity and pronouns, and recognize that that is necessary and important for us to talk about in order to respect our patients. And then I also see here I've been asked to provide additional SOGI training to expand on their DEI training. I provided why it's important for providers to be able to engage in conversations past DEI training. Wonderful. I'm glad that they're looking for additional training as well, because that is another way that we can continue to support folks. And also because we're going to have turnover, we're going to have folks, we generally need to hear things multiple times in order for it to stick. And so I might be really versed in talking about gender identity and social determinants of health and how those impact our health outcomes. But if I was trying to learn something brand new, if I heard it once, I likely would get like maybe 10% of it, but I have to hear it multiple times in order to really be able to have it stick, and then be able to critically apply it to new situations, not just the situations that were discussed about when I first learned it. And so it's the same for gender identity. It's the same for DEI. It's the same for talking about how we can be inclusive of gender diverse communities in our services. We oftentimes have to hear these things multiple times to be able to say, like, okay, now I know this foundational information. How can I apply it critically to what is going on in the work that I do every day? So that's really great to hear. I really hope that you are getting paid for that. And I really hope that they are taking that information and that training and applying it to the work that they are doing. And if you ever need support around training, please let me know, because that's what I do. I am a trainer and I support organizations in better serving trans and non-binary people as well. So these are some of the ways that we can help folks. This is how we can do a little bit better. I think it's important for us to talk about visibility. I think it is a good step. But if it doesn't go beneath the surface of we've put trans people on things, or we've put the progressive pride flag on things, or we put the trans pride flag on things, if it doesn't go deeper than that, then it's actually not it's not inclusive for us. It's not actually changing, again, the material conditions of our lives. It's not allowing us the opportunity to actually get our health needs met. And in some instances, especially we see this with corporations, it's pandering to us in order to then take the money that is received from our community and using it to actively work against us. So we have to look at how we can go deeper than just visible representation. Though it might be a first step, it's not the last step. We have to dig deeper than that. So I want to thank you all for being present today. Thank you so much for sharing your comments. Thank you, Shakina, for being here and being in the chat. Thank you, Rose, for being here as well. I'm really grateful for the conversations that we have. I'm really grateful to bring you Ask Miss J Live every week. If you like this, please like the video, subscribe, share this with someone that you think could benefit from it, or who might be interested in any of the other videos. We have over 30 on the channel right now, from our first 2 seasons and now on season 3. So very excited about it. So like, share, subscribe. Also, let me know in the comments below, what did you think was most interesting from this? So if you're catching it on the replay, do a #replay and let me know what you thought was interesting. Shakina or Rose, please feel free to share in the chat or in the comments as well what you thought was interesting from this conversation, or other things this might be sparking for you, or ideas this might be sparking for you as well. So as always, thank you so much for being here for Ask Miss J Live. Thank you for taking your time and energy on this lovely Sunday afternoon to learn a little bit more about how you can serve trans and non-binary people. And thank you for investing in the health and well-being of the trans and non-binary community. Until next time, stay safe and much love.